By the time he got to their bedroom, the only thing left of his wife was the faint floral scent on the silk sheets. And for the first time in his life, Park Jae-min, the man who controlled half of Seoul's underworld, felt the cold sting of a fear he couldn't name. The penthouse was silent, save for the hum of the air purifier. It was 11:58 p.m. Ruth stood before the floor-to-ceiling window, a silhouette against the glittering sprawl of Seoul. The city looked like a galaxy of diamonds, but it felt like a cage. Every night was the same. She'd wait, her body thrumming with a quiet, desperate energy until she heard the distant, armored chime of the private elevator. That was her cue. Jaemin was home from his other life, the one of smoke-filled rooms and whispered, violent promises. He would go to his study, and she would go to hers. Ruth slipped out of the expensive silk robe he loved, the one that felt like armor, and pulled on a simple black hoodie and jeans. She was a ghost in her own home, her movements practiced, talent. She tied her hair back, her dark, beautiful face set in a mask of determination. She didn't look at the priceless art on the walls or the diamonds on her dresser. She only looked at the door. Miles away, in a concrete bunker beneath a nondescript Gangnam high-rise, Park Jae-min cleaned a speck of blood from his signet ring. The air was thick with cigar smoke and the metallic tang of fear. His lieutenants stood with their backs rigid, not daring to meet his eyes. He'd just concluded his business, a brutal but necessary lesson in loyalty. Jaemin was a man of absolute control. His world was one of order, respect, and consequences. He dismissed them with a sharp nod, his face unreadable. As they scrambled out, his gaze softened for a fraction of a second, landing on the small, framed photo on his desk. It was Ruth, smiling on their wedding day. His sanctuary, the one pure, soft thing in his jagged world. He wanted to go home. He wanted to breathe in her scent and forget the iron and blood. He took the elevator up, the anticipation of holding her a knot in his chest. But when he entered their bedroom, the only greeting was the cold, empty air. The bed was untouched. A single black-painted bobby pin lay on the floor. And she was gone. We've all felt trapped, even in beautiful places. What's a secret you've kept because you were afraid of what someone would think? Let me know in the comments below. And I promise you, the reason for Ruth's escape is crazier than you can even imagine. You won't want to miss a second of this. Jaemin's hand, the one that had signed death warrants and billion-won deals, was shaking. He didn't call his security team. He didn't need to. He'd had his wife, the beautiful, foreign, fragile wife of the most dangerous man in Seoul, tailed since their wedding day, not because he distrusted her, but because he distrusted the world. He told himself it was for her protection. He walked to his study, the bobby pin clutched in his fist, its cheap paint digging into his palm. He sat in the dark and opened his laptop. He typed a single command to his head of security. Where? The reply was instantaneous. A single encrypted video file. Not live footage, this was a report. This had been happening for weeks. He clicked play. The timestamp read 12:17 a.m. The location was a narrow, rain-slicked alley in Itaewon, far from the polished gleam of Gangnam. His camera was high, discreet. He watched as Ruth, his Ruth, slipped into the unmarked doorway of a bar he'd never heard of. A simple, heavy steel door. Then the feed switched to an agent inside. The bar was small, dark, and filled with women. The air was hazy, the music a low, throbbing bass. He watched his wife move through the crowd, and she was transformed. The tense, high-shouldered grace of the mafia wife was gone. Here, she was fluid. She smiled. She laughed, a full-bodied, unself-conscious laugh that he hadn't heard since their first month of marriage. Then, a woman at the bar turned. Korean, with sharp features and short, lavender-dyed hair. She saw Ruth, and her entire face lit up. Jaemin watched as Ruth slid onto the bar stool. He watched the lavender-haired woman lean in, her hand brushing Ruth's braid. He watched his wife lean into that touch, her eyes fluttering closed for a fraction of a second. It wasn't a kiss. It was 1,000 times more intimate. It was a moment of pure, unguarded belonging. Jaemin slammed the laptop shut, the click echoing in the cavernous silence. It wasn't a rival. It wasn't a man. It wasn't about money or power. It was this. The question formed in his mind, sharp, foreign, and laced with a toxic mix of betrayal and a confusion so deep it made him dizzy. Lesbian? His wife? The woman who had sworn to be his? It felt impossible. It felt like a joke. But the image of her face, so soft and open for someone else, burned behind his eyes. It was the face he had tried, and failed, to win for himself. Jamin did not sleep. He sat in his study until the first gray, polluted light of dawn broke over the city. He didn't review the footage again. He didn't need to. The image of Ruth's soft smile, the one not meant for him, was seared into his mind. But the confusion and pain quickly calcified into something he understood. Control. This wasn't a personal failure, it was a security lapse. A vulnerability. This woman, this stranger with lavender hair, was an unknown variable. A threat. He would not confront Ruth, not yet. To do so would be to admit weakness, to confess he'd been watching. He would handle this the way he handled all problems. He summoned his head of security. "The woman with the purple hair," he said, his voice a low, flat monotone. "I want her name, her family, her debts, where she sleeps, who she owes. I want to know what she ate for breakfast. Am I clear?" "Yes, sir." "And Mrs. Chang?" Jamin's eyes went dead. "You will continue surveillance, but you will not engage. You will not be seen. She is my wife. I will handle my wife." Ruth slipped back into the penthouse at 4:38 a.m., her body alive and thrumming, her soul finally quiet. The moment the armored door hissed shut, the weight of the lie crashed back onto her. She felt like a trespasser. She stripped off her hoodie, hiding it in the back of her closet, and spent 20 minutes in a scalding shower, scrubbing the smell of cheap beer and her perfume, a faint, spicy scent of sandalwood from her skin. She'd only gone for a friend. That's what she told herself. Min-ji. That was her name? Min-ji, who listened. Min-ji, who saw her not as a trophy, but as just Ruth. It wasn't cheating, it couldn't be, it was just breathing. She slid into their massive bed, her skin still damp. Jamin was there, on his side, his back to her. She held her breath, praying he was asleep. She could feel the heat radiating off him, a tense, coiled energy. For a terrifying moment, she thought he would turn, that he would finally ask, "Where were you?" He didn't move. He didn't speak. And the silence in the room was louder than any bomb. The call came at 7 a.m., shattering the tense silence of their breakfast. It was Jamin's mother, the formidable matriarch of the Park family. It was the anniversary of his father's death, and a formal, mandatory family gathering was to be held at their remote mountain estate. For 3 days, they would be trapped. For Jamin, this was business. For Ruth, it was a performance. She was the family's only flaw, the black American wife in a sea of pure-blooded, high-status Koreans. She had to be flawless, graceful, silent, and, above all, devoted to her husband. The estate was a fortress of traditional architecture and modern paranoia. They were shown to their suite, a cavernous room of dark wood and silk screens. There was only one bed. "My mother is traditional," Jamin said, his voice flat as he set down his briefcase. "It's fine," Ruth replied, her own voice a whisper. She wanted to scream. The first night was a dinner that felt more like an interrogation. Aunts and cousins appraised her, their smiles as sharp as knives. Jamin, however, was a different man. He was on. He pulled out her chair. He placed the choicest cut of galbi on her plate. His hand rested possessively on the small of her back. To everyone else, he was the perfect, doting husband. To Ruth, it was torture. Every polite touch felt like a brand, a reminder of her deceit. "You look tired, Ruth C., his mother observed, her voice cutting through the dinner chatter. "Seoul must be very draining for you." The implication hung in the air. "You don't belong here." Before Ruth could formulate a polite defense, Jamin's hand covered hers on the table. His grip was firm, his thumb brushing her knuckle. "She is my wife," he said, his voice quiet but carrying absolute authority. He looked at his mother. "She is perfect. She is just tired because she worries about me." Ruth's heart stuttered. The lie was so smooth, so protective. She looked at him, really looked at him. His eyes were dark, searching, and filled with an emotion she couldn't decipher. It wasn't love. It was something more complex. Ownership? Pride? Or was it pain? He was protecting his idea of her, even as she was shattering it every night. The forced intimacy of the lie bound them closer than any truth. They were snowed in. A freak spring storm had sealed the mountain pass, trapping them at the estate for another day. The tension in their suite was so thick, Ruth felt she could barely breathe. Jamin stood at the window, watching the snow fall, his back a rigid wall of muscle. He had been on his laptop for an hour, in total silence. "Jamin," Ruth finally said, her voice small. "Don't you think you've punished your mother enough? We should at least go down for tea." He didn't turn. "I'm not punishing her. I'm working." "You're avoiding me." He turned slowly. His eyes were not angry. They were worse. They were hollow. "I just received the final report on the woman from the bar." Ruth's blood turned to ice. What woman? What are you talking about?" "Min Ji," he said. The name spoken in his low, precise voice was a violation. 28, bartender. Has a small gambling debt. No family ties to any of my rivals. She is insignificant. He took a step toward her. "But she isn't the real story, is she, Ruth?" "You are." "I don't know what you mean." "My team is very thorough." He turned the laptop toward her. The screen was filled with photos, not of Min Ji. Photos from 5 years ago in Chicago. A younger Ruth, her hair in long braids, laughing in a park. Her arms were wrapped around another woman. A photo of them kissing on a sunlit balcony. A photo of them asleep on a sofa, tangled together. "Her name was Alani," Jamin said, his voice terrifyingly calm, like a documentary narrator. "You lived with her for 3 years. You were engaged until your family found out and threatened to disown you. You told them you would change. You cut her off. And 6 months later, you agreed to the introduction. To me." Ruth couldn't speak. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. "All this time," he whispered, his face a mask of shattered disbelief. "I believed you were my sanctuary. The one person in my world who was not complicated. But this was always who you were." He looked at the photo of her, so happy, so free. "I thought I was protecting you from the world, but you were just hiding from me." He finally understood. Her late nights weren't just a betrayal. They were a return. She hadn't been running to Min Ji. She had been running back to herself. And he was the cage she had to escape from. This is the moment that changes everything. When a secret isn't just a secret, but a whole hidden life. Have you ever had to hide a part of yourself to fit in? Share your thoughts below. Your thoughts? This story is getting so intense, and what happens next? Just wait. The silence that followed his words was heavier than the snow falling outside. Ruth sank onto the edge of the bed, her hands twisting in her lap. The worst was out. The performance was over. "So," she whispered, her voice raw. "What now? Do you annul the marriage? Tell your mother her American daughter-in-law is a pervert?" Jamin flinched, the words striking him. He finally looked away from the laptop, his gaze landing on her. He saw the defiant tilt of her chin, but he also saw the deep, shaking terror in her eyes. The mask was gone. This was the real Ruth. "Is that what you think of me?" he asked, his voice rough. "That I would expose you? Humiliate you?" "You're a mafia boss, Jamin. You handle problems. Am I a problem now?" He walked across the room, not toward her, but to the minibar. His hands, usually so steady, fumbled as he poured 2 glasses of whiskey. He handed one to her. Their fingers brushed. She half expected to be struck. Instead, he just gave her the glass and sat in the chair opposite the bed. "When I was 12, he said, staring into the amber liquid, "my father found out his most trusted bodyguard was skimming. He took me to the meeting. He wanted me to watch, to learn." He took a long drink. He made the man beg, and then he handled the problem. That night, I swore I would never be like him. I would have control, order, no messy emotions, no surprises. He looked at her, his eyes dark with a pain that mirrored her own. "You," he said, "are the biggest surprise of my life." Tears streamed down Ruth's face, hot and silent. I never meant to lie to you. Not really. I lied to myself. I thought I could be her. The wife, the straight woman. I thought if I just tried hard enough, I could be what you wanted. What I wanted? He asked, a bitter laugh escaping him. Ruth, I wanted you. The you I met in Chicago. The one who argued with me about art. The one who wasn't afraid of me. That person was a lie too, she cried. She was pretending. No, he said, his voice firm. He leaned forward. She wasn't. And this is not a problem to be handled. This is my wife. She met his gaze. The chasm between them was still there, vast and terrifying. But for the first time, they were both standing on the edge, looking at it together. He wasn't her jailer. He was just another prisoner in a cage he had built for himself. The shared, broken silence that followed was more intimate than any touch they had ever shared. The snow melted, and the mountain pass cleared. They drove back to Seoul in a new, fragile silence. The confession had changed the air between them. It was no longer hostile. It was uncertain, heavy with unspoken questions. When they returned to the penthouse, Ruth knew she had to do one last hard thing. She couldn't live a double life, but she also couldn't leave Minji in the dark. She owed her the, truth. That night, she went back to the bar in Itaewon, not to hide, but to say goodbye. But the bar was dark. A closed for repairs sign was taped crookedly to the steel door. A cold dread trickled down Ruth's spine. She called Minji's number. It went straight to voicemail. Then she saw her, huddled in the alleyway, smoking a cigarette, her lavender-haired head buried in her hands. Minji, Ruth said, her voice trembling. Minji looked up, and her eyes, usually so bright and playful, were wide with terror. She flinched, scrambling back. Don't, please, just go, Ruth. What happened? Who did this? Your husband's men, Minji whispered, her voice breaking. They were here. They paid off my gambling debt. All of it. In Kai, Ruth's heart seized. He paid you? No, Minji said, standing up, her body shaking. They didn't pay me. They paid the loan sharks who were going to break my legs. And then one of them, a man in a perfect suit, he smiled at me. He said, Mr. Park is very generous. He has saved you. He knows you will be grateful. He said he knows I'm smart enough to understand that this kindness means I will forget. Forget the bar. Forget this alley. Forget you. The blood drained from Ruth's face. A kindness. The word was a blade. She ran all the way back to the penthouse. She burst into Jaemin's study, not bothering to be quiet. He was on the phone, but he hung up when he saw her face. You did it, she seethed, her voice a low, venomous shake. Jaemin's expression was calm. I fixed the problem. The loan sharks were a genuine threat. She is safe now. Safe? Ruth's laugh was a dry, broken sob. You threatened her. You used your money and your monsters to scare her away from me. You didn't solve a problem, Jaemin. You handled me. I was protecting you, protecting us, he roared, standing up, his control finally snapping. That is how my world works. She was a loose end, a vulnerability that our enemies could find. I did what was necessary. You did what your father would do, she screamed, and the words hit him like a physical blow. You saw a messy emotion and you crushed it. You didn't see me. You didn't see her. You just saw a thing to be handled. You didn't save me, Jaemin. You proved that I am and will always be just another possession in your perfect cold cage. She went to the bedroom and grabbed her passport. Ruth, he said, his voice suddenly small. Don't. Where will you go? She stopped at the door, her back to him. Anywhere. I'd rather be broke and hunted than be your prisoner. She looked at him one last time, her eyes dead. I'm done. The armored door hissed shut, leaving Jaemin alone in the deafening, glittering silence of his perfect life. He had lost the only thing he'd ever truly wanted, precisely because he'd tried to own it. Ruth didn't get far. She made it to the lobby of a cheap motel in Myeongdong. her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold up. Her credit card, a card she knew Jamin could track. He could shut it off in an instant. He could have his men here in 5 minutes. She was playing a game she couldn't win. She paid in cash for one night, went up to the grimy room and bolted the door. She slid to the floor, her passport clutched to her chest, and finally, she sobbed. It was a raw, ugly sound of terror and grief. She was free, but she had never been more alone. Back in the penthouse, Jamin stood in the center of his study. The words, "You did what your father would do," echoed off the cold glass. He looked at the heavy, ornate desk he had inherited, a symbol of his power. He had become the king of a perfect, empty kingdom. He had proven her right. He was a jailer. His head of security called. "Sir, we have a problem." "She's my wife, not a problem," Jamin snapped, his voice rough. "No, sir, not Mrs. Chang. It's the Kims, rival family. They've been watching the building. They saw her leave, alone. They think she's a loose end. A way to get to you. They're mobilizing." The blood drained from Jamin's face. The exact words he had used. Loose end. In handling the insignificant threat of Minji, he had ignored the real one. In trying to control Ruth, he had pushed her, unprotected, directly into the path of men who were not kind. Men who would not just scare her, but use her. Men who would do what he had only threatened. This is that moment, isn't it? The one where you realize your actions have consequences you never even imagined. It's so easy to let pride get in the way, to double down on a mistake. What do you think is the hardest thing to do? Admit you're wrong or fight for what you've lost? Let me know in the comments, and if you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe, because you need to see how this ends. Jamin was at a crossroads. The mafioso in him would let her go. She was a liability. She had betrayed his trust. She was no longer his. But the man who had listened to her talk about art, the man who had felt a strange, quiet peace just by having her in his house, knew he had been the one to betray her. He had a choice: pride or vulnerability, control or love. He grabbed his car keys and a pistol from his desk safe. "Sir, the team is ready," his security chief said over the phone. "What are your orders? Do we retrieve her?" "No," Jamin said, his voice a low growl. He was already in the elevator, jamming the button for the garage. "You will stand down. You will not follow me. You will not touch her. This is my mess." "But sir, the Kims..." "You will handle the Kims. Distract them. Start a fire. I don't care. But I'm going to find my wife. Me, alone." He hung up. He wasn't going as a boss. He wasn't going to retrieve a possession. He was going as a man, terrified and raw, to find the woman he had broken. He was finally choosing truth. Jamin found the motel. He didn't pull up in his, black armored sedan. He'd taken a nondescript car and parked a block away. He walked through the buzzing neon entrance, his perfectly tailored suit looking alien in the grime. He found the room and raised his hand to knock. He hesitated, his fist trembling. This was harder than any negotiation, riskier than any gunfight. He was unarmed. He knocked. Inside, Ruth jolted. She stared at the door, her heart hammering. Who is it?" "It's me." Jamin's voice was low, strained, and right outside the door. "It's just me, Ruth. I'm alone. Please." She crept to the door and looked through the peephole. It was him. Not the boss, not the king. He was just a man. His hair was a mess. His tie was loose. He looked broken. She unbolted the door and opened it just a crack. He didn't push his way in. He just stood there, his hands open at his sides. "They're hunting you," he said, his voice raw. "The Kims. They saw you leave. They think you're a weakness. My weakness." Ruth's blood ran cold. "I can make you disappear," he continued, his eyes pleading. "I can put you on a plane, give you a new name, a new life. You can be you, anywhere you want. I will have my best men protect you from a distance. You will never see me again, I promise." Ruth stared at him. This was the out, the escape she'd dreamed of. And that's what you want?" "What I want," he said, his voice finally breaking, "is for you to be safe. And what I want," he took a step back, giving her space, "is impossible because you were right. I was my father. I saw something I didn't understand and I tried to crush it. I put you in a cage, Ruth. I became the monster you were running from." She opened the door wider. "Jamin?" "I am so sorry," he whispered. "I'm sorry I handled you. I'm sorry I saw your light as a threat to my darkness." And in that moment, in the buzzing fluorescent light of a cheap motel hallway, Ruth finally saw the man. Not the mafia boss. The man who had been just as trapped as she was. She stepped out of the room. She was terrified. But she was more afraid of being alone than she was of him. And what if I don't want to run? His head snapped up, his eyes wide with a desperate, fragile hope. "What if I'm tired of running?" she said, her voice shaking but finding its strength. "You're right, you're a mafia boss. And I'm a lesbian. And I am also your wife." She took a deep breath. "You can't build a fortress big enough to protect us, Jamin. The Kims, your mother, my past. There will always be a war. But I won't be your weakness." She stepped forward and, for the first time, took his hand. Not because he was giving it to her, but because she was taking it. "But I will be your partner. If you'll have me, the real me." He looked at her hand in his. He intertwined his fingers with hers, his grip so tight it ached. "Ruth," he breathed, his voice thick with emotion. "No more cages," she said. "No more cages," he promised. He didn't lead her. He didn't pull her. They just walked. They left the motel room hand in hand and stepped out into the dangerous, chaotic, and complicated soul night. Together. And that's the end of their beginning. What a story. We all build cages around ourselves and around the people we love. The final question is, what does love at last really mean to you? Is it about finding the perfect person? Or is it about finding the courage to be imperfect together? Thank you so much for watching. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. We have so many more emotional stories coming, and you won't want to miss a single one. See you in the next video.